Our friends, welcome to the channel. Bob here, and this is a video that is kind of like a kind of series that I've been thinking about doing for a while, and it kind of was, and I guess it kind of kicked off. It was prompted by the Project Gorgon video I did about how I felt about the development and stuff. But this is kind of stuff that I've been thinking about doing a series on for a long time, and so I thought I would kind of carry it on. And this one is kind of related to that video again, but also related to another video that I was watching recently. And I guess the series is, I've already done one video, so you can probably tell what it's going to be about. But it's just going to be about, I guess, the culture and psychology of not just gaming, but kind of like social media in general, but generally how it kind of fits in with gaming and that kind of thing. Before I start, I mean, I know you shouldn't have to do these disclaimer type things, but these are just thoughts and opinions and observations. If you want to take them as something else, that's down to you. Stick it up your backside. That's all I've got to say on that point. But anyway, yeah. So the first video was, I guess the first video was talking about how people react when you say something negative about something that they really like. And this could be. I mean, I'm not saying it was a case in the video that I did, but this could be people who have followed your content for ages. This could be on social media as well. If you've got a social media following, this could happen on there as well. But it could be someone who's watched your content for ages, and you kind of would think they would have a grasp of when you're talking about something. They kind of understand what you're talking about. But even people like that, like that time that you pick on something that they love, that you might make observations about that you class them negative or just feedback or whatever it may be. They kind of it's just a switch. It's just a switch that says, like, I don't like you anymore. You've said something bad about what I like, and so that's it. We're finished. This relationship is over. I'm unsubscribing. And my response to that is always, see you later. And it always will be, no matter who it is. But this is just looking at. So I talked about a particular something that happens quite often. The other thing that happens as well, and this is something that's a more general thing, is that people think that I guess the term is, there's a couple of things that goes on. I guess the overarching term could be, you could call it something like you just don't get it, or this thing, in this case, this game is not for you. And that's another common thing that happens. It's not just happening. This is not something that specifically happens in gaming. It's quite a general thing. And you've made some observations or comments about a game that they really, really love, and they didn't like those comments. So their defense mechanism, for want of a better term, is to just say that you just don't get it, or obviously this game's just not for you. And this kind of takes the shape in a few different ways. I think the first thing is that, but for all of this stuff, generally it's all taken out of context. But one of the ways that this will generally happen is that someone will say this is just not for you, and the other way is that people will say they'll kind of, I think in all the situations when you get a comment about this kind of thing, and it happened in this video that I was watching as well recently, is that it's taken out of context, and then they try to treat it as though, what's the words I can use? They try to treat it as though you don't know what you're talking about, even though it's clear that you've got some experience in it. So I'll try and explain what I mean. So I've played, if I use a Project Gorgon video as an example, because that's I've had other examples before, but that's the most recent example that I can think of when looking at how people's psychology and how they react. Is that my first Project Gorgon video was 4 years ago. And even a cursory glance at the video that I'm assuming that these people took, they'd probably. I'm assuming that from what they're saying, they're supposed to be experienced Project Gorgon players, but are they really? I mean, even a cursory glance at the video and what I was talking about. Actually, no. Let me have a quick look at the video, because maybe I'm incorrect in that. I don't want to make stuff up. I think maybe in the case of that particular video I was talking about, then, but partly it was to do with the video, that it's partly to do with how I presented the video. Yeah, so how I presented the video was There wasn't anything on the screen. But I spoke about things in the video. What I'm trying to say is I spoke about things in the video that would make it clear that I wasn't a newbie. I hadn't just started. I mean, I was in the highest level zone in the game, you know, and I mean, I don't really leave comments on other people's videos occasionally, but it's very, very rare. But if I was going to make an assumption about someone, I would at least have a quick look at their playlists to see how long they'd been playing a game before I decided to tell them that they just didn't get it or it wasn't for them. But yeah, so a cursory glance at my playlist would show that I played PG for 4 years. The fact that but you wouldn't even need to do that, because I did listen to the video again, and it's clear listening to the video that I'm not a newbie player. So yeah, so the first thing you find is that the people assume that, or that they pick out the bits that they pick out the bits they don't like, and they just assume that you don't get it. Basically, they assume that you're maybe a new player that just started the game. You've come across these issues, and they've decided, oh well, you know, new player. You're saying this. I don't agree with you, so that means that this game's obviously not for you. So why don't you move on? But that obviously that's not the case, you know, because I've played Project Gorgon for a long time, and I've played lots of MMOs like that on the channel for a long time. So even a quick glance at my video feeds would give you pretty much all the information you need about how like the games that I play and what I enjoy doing. I've said many times in videos that I enjoy grindy stuff. You know, that's not something that I am scared of or shy away from. So in a nutshell, that's kind of, and I'm sure you've all come across this before when you've been watching videos and stuff, or if you've been talking to someone about this subject and they've said, oh, you just don't get it, you know, or whatever, you know, a book or a film, or you make a comment that's not 100% positive and they come out with, you know, like the White Knight kind of defense mechanism type thing. And and just assume that you don't know what you're talking about, or you didn't understand it. That's another one that happens as well. You weren't smart enough to grasp what was going on. That's something else that you get as well. And it's funny because I kind of see. So like one of the comments I got was, if you can't take the heat, get out of the game. There are plenty of theme park MMOs for people that need their hands held, blah, 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 blah. So there's an assumption there that I'm looking for a theme park MMO to hold my hand. That's clearly not the case. I've played Project Gorgon, other sandbox MMOs long enough for that to not be the case. Can't take the heat. I've done a ton of grinding in Project Gorgon. You know, I did grinding on stuff when it was harder to do. You know, I went through, because I wanted battle chemistry, I went through the whole process of grinding out alchemy, you know, so was it alchemy? I think, yeah, alchemy, so I could get battle chemistry, you know. So I've earned my stripes in the game with regards to that kind of thing. And I was watching another video recently. It was an Asmongold video. I kind of become a bit addicted to watching his videos because I really like him actually. I kind of didn't think I would, but when he's talking about stuff, he's quite a smart guy. Makes a lot of sense. I think sometimes he kind of thinks he's smarter than he is, and I don't agree with everything he says. But generally, yeah, his takes on stuff are generally quite interesting, if nothing else. And he was talking about WoW and some of the mythic raids and how just ridiculously hard they are, and they don't need to be that hard. You don't need to have these mechanics in the game where you know, you've got a millisecond to think about moving somewhere or doing something, or if you don't, then it's all over. And like bearing in mind that you would assume that these people know. I mean, he's played WoW for a long time. You know, from what I can tell, he's tanked all the hardest raids. He's got some achievements, some stuff for some of the hardest stuff in the game with regards to raiding and all that kind of thing. So you'd assume he knows what he's talking about. But the moment he made that comment about maybe this stuff doesn't have to be quite as hard as it is, you then got people saying, oh, well, you don't like hard games, or exactly the same sort of thing. Oh, you don't get it. It's supposed to be hard. All that kind of stuff, you know. And his responses are always funny. I do enjoy listening to the way that he talks to his chat, because I feel you should dig out the morons, essentially, and that's kind of what a lot of this stuff is. It's digging out the morons. And it's amazing that, like, I mean, maybe these people don't know. You know, but even if you didn't know what his experience was in WoW, it's clear that he wasn't saying he wanted it to be easier. You know, what he was saying was that it didn't need to be as stupidly hard as it is. And there was another video where he was talking about this as well, where he said for new people, like, World of Warcraft has become just inaccessible because there's so many different mechanics. You go from one expansion to another, and all the work you put in on one expansion becomes obsolete because some mechanic is changing the next one, because they're trying to come up with these ideas to try and, improve the popularity of the game when the popularity has been falling for years. Yeah, and he did another video where he was talking about, he was speaking to someone, an experienced player, and they were talking to a new player, and the guy was saying, about stuff he had done and stuff, and this experienced player said, "Well, have you done this yet?" And the guy said, "No, what's this?" And he goes, "Well, you need to do this, and this." And the guy was, the experienced player was explaining to this new guy stuff he had to do, and he said, "Like, I'll give you a hand with it, don't worry," and all that kind of stuff. Basically, the guy quit the game. He just went. He said, "Actually, no." And he just quit. and when he was reading that comment out, he got the same comments from people like, "Oh, this person wasn't willing to put in the time." And it's got nothing to do with that. It's about, and it was funny because in both of these videos, like he said, like for some players, it's like a dick waving thing, where I've gone through this rite of passage. It was really hard. I didn't actually enjoy it, but I did it, and and that's a badge of honour, and you've got to do it as well. And I think that's what a lot of this stuff comes down to. It's because it's clear that when we talk about these kind of things, what we're talking about is just making it more fun. We're not necessarily talking about making it easier, but there's no need for it to be unfun. There's no need to be an initiation process in any of these mechanics that are unfun until you get to a point where they're kind of fun. And it's nothing to do with difficulty. I think there's a difference between difficulty and fun, but also difficulty and accessibility. You can have a mechanic or a skill put into a game that's ridiculously grindy, but have an introduction to it that means that the person feels like they want to go forward and do that grind, if you know what I'm talking about. And I think a lot of this stuff with players where they talk about, oh, it's got to be hardcore, it's hardcore and niche for a reason, was a comment that someone used. And I don't get that. It's like, what is that saying? What it sounds to me, it's a bit like where we accept, it's a bit like where we keep pre-ordering games and they come out and they're crap, and you have to wait like a week for patches and stuff before they actually work properly. It's like we're accepting things that are just unfun from the off, just because, well, that's just how it is, and no one seems to be no one seems to be recipient of change. Maybe things can be done in a different way, and I do think a lot of this is just willy waving and like badge of honour type stuff. A lot of it is like, well, I've gone through these big grinds that I didn't find particularly fun, but I did them anyway because it was a means to an end. So that's what everyone's got to do it. And I think a lot of people also don't want things changed because they don't want. It's like Project Gorgon, I think, is a game. Like, from listening to some people talking, since the thing is, like, I'm guilty of this. You start playing a game and you get involved in this little bubble where everything's great and whatnot, and it's all fantastic and you love it, and then you start to find things that are maybe not fun, and you point them out, and you end up on the outside of the bubble. And people always say about how great Project Gorgon's community is and how great Shroud of the Avatar's community is. I'm talking about these little indie MMO games, Worm Online, wherever it may be. And for the most part, they maybe are, but there's also an element of those communities that are not, and they're quite toxic. And they have this mindset where I don't want things to change in the game, because this is the game that I want, and it gets to a point where it becomes, this is the game that I want over and above maybe what the developers want. Now maybe this is what the developers want for their games. I don't know. No one really knows. That they might have things planned ahead a year or two where things might change, or they might be keeping an eye on something and thinking, well, maybe we need to change this. But I guess the overarching point of this video was things that people find fault with in what you've said, but it's all taken completely out of context. And another common thing, a common thing I said before about comments people make, another common thing that people say was they'll try and make it sound like the game's just not for you. You should go and play something else. To a point where someone will actually say, oh well, this is obviously not your sort of game. It's like a pat on the head. Oh, sorry son, you obviously need a game where your hands held and there's no freedom of this person said, and there are plenty of theme park MMOs people who don't need their hands held and don't value freedom of exploration. So the comments that I've made means that I don't value my freedom of exploration in an MMO. It's weird. It's strange stuff. It's like but you get this on Twitter and social media, don't you, where people they'll listen to a 30-minute podcast, and but there's like a 10-15 second part that they really hated, so they'll take that out of context of the whole podcast and then make comments based on just that point rather than actually looking at in the context of the whole thing. Yeah, it's a strange thing, and it's interesting because it's something that we wouldn't have come across if we didn't have social media, I guess. So although I'm sure it happens in real life, it wasn't something that I came across much in real life, because the thing in real life is that people can't really say that to you because you're there standing in their face, and you can then respond, and you can explain. Actually, no, I mean I haven't had it happen to me, but I have seen it happen in real life. And what generally happens is, it's a bit like watching a video of it's not watching an interview of like someone in Extinction Rebellion. The interviewer may or may not. Some of the ones I've seen they didn't, but some of the ones I saw put across good points. And because you're hitting them with good points and they don't have a comeback, it's like, you don't understand it. Don't you know what 2 degrees looks like? What? Neither do you. You're just using terms that you've heard other people use to try and make your point. Yeah, so it is something that also does happen in real life, and it's the same thing. It's like someone's hit with some good points, and they don't really have a response because their whole worldview on that particular subject or Project Gorgon or New World or whatever it may be is based around an obsessive, like, psychology thing, where it can't possibly, I love it, so it can't possibly be wrong. And anyone who's got a different opinion, like, they have to be wrong because I love it so much, and yeah, and it's interesting. But that's the thing I've talked about there is a common thing that you'll find in anything, not just gaming. When you're talking about films or books and stuff, it will be, you didn't get it, or it's not for you, or maybe you need to go and play WoW. That's another common thing. When it's clear, as I said, that even if it's clear you've put the time in, and these kind of grindy things are generally what you generally like, because you've fallen outside of that a little bit, or you're questioning it a little bit, then it must mean that it's not for you. And they don't seem to be able to grasp that maybe the point is right. Maybe if you like if I go back to like the animal husbandry thing, like, animal husbandry is absolutely, I'm the target audience. I love taming in games. Like, I tame in games where the taming is shite, to be quite frank. And I still log into games where there's taming, just so I can log in and have a look at my pets and muck around with them. Animal husbandry, I'm the target audience for animal husbandry because of its like secondary nature. It goes hand in hand with animal handling. So if I'm not finding it fun, there must be other people out there that are not finding it fun. And it's not finding it fun in the sense that I don't want to put the time in. They're just design choices that don't make sense, and they don't make sense. But they're also not respecting my time, and I think that's one of the worst things in MMOs now, where they don't respect people's time. Like, as I said, like, I'm happy to grind out something to get to a point. That's fine. But when things are when a new mechanic's put into a game where it just purposely seems to have been put in there to not respect my time, then yeah, that's kind of where it loses me. And I think that, I don't know, maybe I don't know. Maybe it is just me. I'm not sure, but I think that developers could learn a lot from just even in a hardcore niche game, as as it was termed. Even in a game like that, you know, make the initial entry into a mechanic or a skill accessible, you know, and then hit it with a grind. Because someone like me, I understand that Project Gorgon is a grindy game, right? So at some point, for a skill, I'm going to have to grind. But don't introduce it in a way where initially it's just off-putting. You know, it's just not. I just don't see the point of that. I feel that you can still have your hardcore niche experience. But at the same time, make it fun and interesting. You know, make the introduction fun and interesting, just to guide someone into it. But as I said, yeah, I think for a lot of players with that mindset, I think it's just like a willy waving thing. You know, they want it to be like that because it makes, I don't know, maybe it makes them feel special. You know, maybe the whole reason they like it is because they can then come and say to someone, I bet this is what it is for some people. They like it because they can then go and say to someone who plays WoW or whatever, oh well, this game's obviously not for you. It's too hardcore for you, which is just like the worst take I think you could probably have. Particularly when, as I was talking about the Asmongold Gold video, particularly when you've probably got some context to how that person normally plays, but you have to take it out of context, otherwise you've then got nothing to say about their opinion, you know, so you've got nothing. And that's why a lot of these conversations with quite extreme groups fall into that same thing when you see an interview. I mean, as I said before, admittedly, some interviewers are just there to wind people up, right? But when you get a good interviewer and they put across good points, these conversations generally end with the person walking off because they've got nothing to say. You know, all they can do is keep repeating the message that they've got, that's been banged into them. You know, so yeah, but interesting. It's just I'll be doing more videos like this because I do find this kind of thing, just very interesting. And you sit here looking at some nice immersive EverQuest, a good immersive EverQuest scene as well, where I think the days changed. Went from night to day as I was talking. So you got a bit of like the skies in EverQuest are amazing considering how old the game is. The way that the beautiful colours and the way that it changes from night to day and vice versa. Yeah, but anyway. I've got some other topics like this to talk about on videos and stuff, and I'll be doing them in the future. But I guess these first two are just related to experiences that I had recently with a video, and just how interesting I find them, and just how out of context people will take stuff, or if it's not out of context, they will kind of ignore your previous history to come to a conclusion that this game is obviously too hard for you. Bizarre. But there you go. That's kind of where we are when people can have conversations across a keyboard, I suppose. You know, it's just one of those things. Anyway, if you've got any other topics that you want me to add onto the list of stuff I've got to talk about like this, then, or if any experiences that you've got that you want to talk about, that I can talk about on a video or something, let me know. But anyway, thanks for watching.